Hi, Julian here again. Welcome back to my mentorship video series with Stephen Bauman. Here are two drawings that I sent over to Stephen to look at. This month I tried adding halftone to my drawings as per Stephen's suggestion. I feel quite good about these considering how last month went, but there's definitely other things I can work on, and we'll get into that in this meeting. Just as a reminder, if you want to avail of this service as well from Stephen, you can look up his Patreon. I believe that it's slot based, so there might not be slots open at the moment, but you can always check. I'll have a link below for that. And he also has courses on his website, which I'll also link below, and on proko.com. You might be familiar with Proko as well. And if you have any comments, questions, or suggestions, please feel free to leave a comment on this video. And I just want to say thank you so much for checking this video out. And I'm just going to cut to the meeting.
Yeah, what's your take, and then I'll give you my take.
I actually ended up very happy with these drawings as far as progress. Mm-hmm. I think my hang up is in my head. I was thinking when Stephen looks at this, he's going to but he's going to comment about the edges probably, because I did feel a bit underdeveloped or clumsy to me. And last month we talked about how to render hair or draw hair. And I tried it, but my S curves just look weird and ugly to me.
Yeah.
I think in my opinion, when looking at these drawings, I think I should have gone a little darker. I've gone up to a 4B, but I'm wondering if I should have brought out my 6B or 8B on them. But I don't know if that's like what you think. I was kind of focusing on limiting the range. I was thinking maybe 2 shadow values and then halftone. But I think there's probably 2 or 3 or maybe more values in the shadow.
Yeah. I think that's par for the course. I mean, graphite's graphite, charcoal's charcoal. Like, it's difficult to make those perfect values. I'm sure we talked about that. Funny that you mentioned like the S curves in your hair. I always feel that way. I always feel like my hair shapes are crap. And that, and I work on them and I go, they look like shit, and they're not any good. I don't know. That might just be the perpetual state of affairs that we'll just always feel that way,
No, I don't want to feel that way. I want to be like, okay, that's okay. I want to feel that way.
So I've been doing all these podcasts with Michael Klein, right?
Yeah, I've seen
where we're both painting, and we get a lot of conversations about process and creativity and stuff. And in a recent episode, I was recording with him and my best friend, Steve Forster. We were interviewing him. He's a really good painter. And Steve and I were discussing our shared experiences of ridicule from our teachers, that were like cruel and unusual to us. And Michael, of course, waded in with his experience. And he said, oh, yeah, one time Jacob Collins, who he studied with, had said something about his drawing, and then the next day somebody said to Michael, oh, don't worry about it, he does that to everybody. But Michael hadn't even noticed that there was anything to have been offended about, like it totally went over his head. And this was his shared story. He was like, oh, that was my experience with ridicule from a teacher. Steve and I, of course, have volumes of teacher ridicule, because that was the style at the Florence Academy at the time. But all this to say, eventually Michael said something that we've both been joking with each other about. It's become a part of my core philosophy in how I work. But Michael was saying that he just realized at some point that the best thing that he had to offer was his point of view. And he could only be good at his point of view. So whenever he painted something, that was just his take. And that's what he does.
Mm.
This is just my take. And it sounds, obviously, it's very reductive, but I think it's like the most healthy thing you could possibly imagine when you're drawing and painting. So we could look at our hair and say, well, this is just my take. This is my point of view today. That's what I drew.
Okay.
And then you move on. And you'll have your take tomorrow and the next day and the subsequent year and 10 years from now. You'll just be offering your take.
Okay.
And it's fine. So like, I can see from your lack of amazement that this has not really landed with you. But the amount of like shame that I generally feel about my shape design and my creativity has been almost totally mitigated by this idea
Oh
that it's
yeah.
just my take. It's where I am today.
That's good. I think it just needs to sit with me for
Mm,
a bit.
that's okay.
I do have something. I have a similar thought, which is this is just me today, and
Mm,
it'll be different tomorrow. You know.
hmm. Yeah. Embrace that Michael Klein mentality, you know? I, for one, like have really no complaints about this one. There are some, you know, some inaccuracies. I think that like maybe you have kind of straightened up the pose a bit
Hmm.
compared to what it is. Kind of when you look at the alignments of some things on this. Uh, but you know, I'm not offended by it. I think that you know, I definitely recognize the kind of likeness in it, and I see one of the shining examples that probably will go underrated to you, but it's actually the sense of form that you've derived in the hair. Uh, like the way that you're allocating values based on form, I think is really good. You're even careful to take like light areas in darker planes and not allow them to be as light as the light areas in central planes. I think all those things are really good, quite highly kind of developed ideas. So you'll continue working on obviously the strength of accuracy in your block-ins, but as far as developing values goes, I think this is for the moment, right? A kind of high watermark for where you are today. Uh, yeah, I think what it shows is a very conscious analysis of form and an insertion of value into that paradigm, which does not necessarily commonly occur. I think when people are beginning to work into values, usually it's a different ideas are associated in incorrect ways, and it creates more negative variables. I think this is very good, actually.
Oh, great! I'm very happy to hear you say that. Um,
Yeah, I mean, even down to like areas, you know, when we get to the roof of the mouth here, and like kind of getting a sense of that slightly oblique plane with another plane that's kind of facing much more towards the light, you can really see the what the background of structural work has done to your initial application of values and how it's made it so coherent. There's one place where I have a little bit of a question about it is, no, you know what? I can see in the nose where you're going. It's just somehow this plane didn't get quite as light as it should.
hmm.
I don't know if like it almost looks like there's a further erasure up here, but that maybe seems like there's some incidental erasure that happened, and yeah, I don't know. For some reason, this didn't wind up as the lightest plane. Somehow that's the lightest plane in that area when it should be obviously a bit in reverse. That receives some value, and then the lightest values are allocated towards this. kind of intermediate plane here, kind of facing the much more towards the light.
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Following that, there's two things that kind of catch my eye at first. One is what I think is generally like a good observation through this plane. Uh, I don't know why it doesn't take like a further step into creating somewhat of a gradient out from the nasolabial fold. It seems like that would be such a clear conclusion to draw from how that plane is turning and how the value is affecting that kind of crease in the form. So that feels like it should kind of go along with that idea. And then just from the there's a major kind of plane shift that happens here, right? That you can see evidenced in several kind of ways. Uh, but that leads to an overall kind of tapering of the form of the chin and jaw, which usually results in this being a overall relatively downturning plane. I think that you're getting a hold of the idea that um, that there is this plane shift that occurs in advance of the shadow edge, but halftone planes writ large, like in other ways, are not always maybe sufficiently addressed. So I think you can consider halftones kind of in two ways. One about like a large plane of grouped halftone value, and another is obviously a like a plane shift that happens like at the edge of a shadow, for example. So I think that could be like a slightly better representation to adjust those planes accordingly.
Mm-hmm.
Make sense?
I think so.
And then, of course, you have this tone paper, which gives you the possibility to indicate specular highlights, the higher key planes with,
Actually,
yeah.
it isn't a tone paper.
Oh my God, it looks exactly like that Stillman and Byrne like beige paper that I use.
Yeah, I didn't notice it until now, so that's my
Okay.
bad. But I don't know why it looks so dark.
Yeah, I think that'll just be the way that your camera has kind of keyed the lightest light. Post processing on like phone cameras is so rampantly out of hand. Like it makes massive decisions about like I wonder if this is like it noticed a warm color and so like associated that to a much because obviously this is supposed to be a white paper, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, those bastards.
Yeah, I don't know if it looks any whiter in this.
Yeah, it looks white as hell. Yeah,
Wait, what is happening there? He's trying to focus on. That's funny. I think
it's
Zoom
doing
is
like a
trying to.
facial recognition.
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, you've done a good portrait then.
That used to be my milestone, actually. Like, oh, iPhone picks up a face.
That's fantastic. Um, yeah, the next one has got to be like if you draw a self-portrait, you can open your phone with it. That
Oh,
would be no, it would never
no.
work though because I think it,
Really?
it uses like depth.
Yeah.
It's responding to depth, not like a flat 2D.
Oh, but then if you do like a sculpture,
Yeah, then you'd know.
that would be funny to like steal someone's phone and then make a sculpture out of their face.
That's the long con right there. Gotta make a fucking sculpture. Somebody's phone you steal. Um, yeah. So to the S curve idea, I can get where you're coming from. I mean, some of them don't look maybe fully realized. They could have more gesture to them, but I also don't think that they're unrecognized. It's more about developing a sensitivity to S curves and gesture, and I don't necessarily know that that comes for free. Um, I've been wanting to say lately, because when talking about drawing, it's very easy to default to saying you need to like feel this or feel that, and I feel like that is relatively non-instructive.
Hmm.
So I want to say, you need to develop intuition for this or an intuition for that. In the case of S curves, um, I just think that the drawing of them is more of a feeling-based drawing. I mean, I want to say it's another way, but I struggle to develop a conviction that I feel like it actually is another way. So obviously, one can, you know, generate S curves out of a design that's more, what's the word? That is more articulated and less rhythmic. But I wonder if that's actually more effective or not.
Hmm.
When you're drawing a sculpture, it's one thing to say it could be done in this way. When you're drawing, even from a photograph, you could say perhaps. But what I'm often struck by is how much hair can look like skin if it's sort of drawn with the same essential design elements, right? Does that make sense? Like, meaning, like, if I draw the skin and the forms, the face in terms of planes and so, like, will I not simply end up drawing hair that looks like the physical form of skin and bone and flesh and all that?
Hmm.
So do you think that kind of integrating the idea of like how to generate curvature and to follow and mimic curvature is probably not a bad thing? I think it can add a lot actually to your design repertoire, so to speak, which ultimately would be a benefit. So I suspect, looking at this, that you've never really engaged in drawing in the manner that I'm doing here.
I have, just not in this setup. I think with a vertical canvas, I'll say
Mm,
it's different for me. I guess I don't know why it would be different. I guess the wrist angle, but I had done gesture figure drawings before with curves.
mm, hmm. I think hair has its, well, I mean, I'm big on saying that, of course, hair has actually a lot in common with the figure, in the sense that a lot of the way that I develop my understanding of gesture kind of comes from figure drawing.
Hmm.
Like drawing the edge of the standing leg. A lot of the gestures that I developed here are based on like drawing overlapping muscular anatomy, you know?
Hmm.
Like, it tends to have this particular kind of sinuous curve that is kind of very controlled. Uh, but then the kind of flowing nature of hair, it just is, it's its own kind of design problem. And while I think you're doing a cool job of it, perhaps some of the feeling of, oh my God, I don't like this, could be overcome by engaging with a little bit more of a kind of gestural approach to some of that drawing.
Okay, I'll give it a try.
I just think with this model's hair, it's so yeah, there's so much of it, and just to say, like, it's not kind of at random, in that, I don't look at every part of the hair. You do look for where the major like form-based themes are, like I look at this as a form-based theme. Obviously, this overlap here is another form-based theme. There is a way to, if not codify, at least to organize a little bit the way that you're searching out those gestures and forms, you know?
Hmm.
It's not just totally, I say things sometimes, I think, fuck, it make me sound old. It's not necessarily willy-nilly, you know, which
That's not an antiquated phrase, I think.
it definitely is antiquated. And if you don't think it is, it must be because you're antiquated also.
No way. No.
Actually, how old are you, Julian?
I am turning 35 this year.
Ah, there you go,
Oh, no.
35.
I did
What?
my math wrong. I'm turning 33 this year.
Ah, 33.
Yeah.
33 is fantastic. Yeah. Oh, to be fair, 44 is pretty fantastic. Too. It's not bad. I guess it's just about how stressed out you allow yourself to be.
Hmm.
Yeah. So there's those gestures, right? And then there's the kind of broad idea of like gesture throughout the entire drawing, you know? So you have this wonderful S curve here. You have also, I think in some ways there's always like a logic to a gesture. You need to like figure out what the big version of the gesture is before you can go like kind of messing around with getting the smaller gestures to work. Like this to me is a rather unfortunate shape to this side. I don't think it's particularly good. And it would be something in a composition I would endeavor to improve on. Like I would think that if I was going to really draw this, I would probably end up cutting in here to where you could almost see the like the edge of the forehead, and then probably pulling out this lower section of it so that we got cumulatively like this kind of curve that had some interesting volumes to it, you know?
Hmm.
But I guess you have to feel, you know, a little bit confident in what you're doing, what you're searching for, to do things like that. I mean, bearing in mind, of course, it's just hair, and like nobody on planet Earth is going to call you on it. You know,
Hmm.
it only can look good or not good. I don't know that I've ever really critiqued hair and thought, aside from it looking flat, I've never thought, oh, that looks like wrong. Like the shapes that you've made look wrong. They can just look kind of good or bad. Was there anything about this one that that you were thinking about and felt you didn't quite grasp, or
Yeah, I think he actually touched up on it. It's that area here on the model.
yeah,
The way that there's like a light shape that cuts into the brow ridge.
yeah,
I was
yeah?
kind
So
of
it's an interesting thing, right? Because when you start to analyze the skull, what you find is that you have the nasal bone. Well, that's way too big of a brush. You have through here this nasal bone, right? So these two little like small bones side by side, and then obviously they attach to the maxillary, which forms like the edge of the eye socket and that. But then you have the frontal bone, which kind of comes down and has this like suture across here. But the arc of that form like coming in above the outer edge of the eye socket, and you have obviously the edge of the frontal bone through here, right? You have this form that kind of comes over, and then this form almost like cuts in from underneath it. So there's this like volume inward here. Now on women, it tends to be like a little bit more flat. But what I think we're seeing is like light on the underside of that,
mm,
right?
yeah.
So the underside of that volume is like catching this bit of light that creeps up into the eye socket and gives us this light shape that looks, I think, very strange to our eye. I mean, it's just one of those weird coincidences of like how the light falls on this in particular. Um, yeah, I mean, no solution but just to draw it, and also to accept and recognize that I think just going with the flow in an instance like that is better than trying to like logic it out too much. And part of me, I hate to say that, but on another level, I just think drawing is not only to figure everything out. I think that there's a good enough light shave there. I think if anything, I was going to balance the my explanation on it would be how that, how that highlight diminishes around here, so that this kind of encapsulates a little bit where that side plane sits, rather than that highlight traveling all the way into the upper edge of that light shape, which when you squint down, you could imagine it diminishing a little bit into like a darker halftone. Like if I continue that highlight up, that's what it looks like. But it's not that, is it? Like it kind of dissipates through here. It's just one of those weird things that like nature throws at you. Just happens. Never noticed that this model had so many freckles.
I think it's more obvious in some photos than others.
She's Norwegian.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's one of the only Norwegian models that we know.
Hmm.
You think there's models everywhere? It's not true. Not true at all.
Are you in a
Hmm.
particularly remote part of Norway or?
Nope, not particularly remote. I mean, it's in fact you'd say we're in the south of Norway, so the south is the more populated part, just
Hmm.
because it's obviously you want to get as south as you can
Yeah.
if you're Norwegian. So maybe like an hour and a half from Oslo. So not even that far out. It's just there's a lot less Norwegian. It's like a particularly unpopulated part of America or something. It's like
Hmm.
there's not many. This in all of Norway, there's about 5 million people.
Mm. That is very few.
Yeah, what have you got in? And I keep want to say you're in like San Diego. You're not in San
I am.
Diego.
I am.
You're in San Diego. Okay.
Yes.
How many people in San Diego?
1.3 million in 2023.
1.3 million. So that's over a fifth of Norway.
In Southern California, 23 million.
23 milli. So we're quite dispersed here.
Hmm. Yeah, in the whole of
Um,
Norway, I guess.
yeah,
So,
yeah. So you don't. There's not really. I mean, it's the kind of thing where it's like if there's a feature of society that relies upon a high concentration of people, it just won't happen. You know, like in America, there's all these support industries for small businesses because there's so incredibly many people. It dictates that there's so many small businesses. Therefore, there's a whole space for an industry to support that.
hmm.
Here, there's just not as many. So there's no space for that industry to support that thing.
Yeah.
Like if you open a bakery and there's like 5 people in town, there's only so many people that can eat a bun.
Yeah.
Anyway,
How
was
did
there
you
other
get
stuff
it?
about this drawing that
Oh,
they got you?
this is more about hair, but the around where the collarbone is the hair there.
Hmm.
When I look at it and I think this is too hard for me to do.
Yeah.
So because it's not because there is a lot of groups of strands overlapping
Hmm.
and the fact that it's away from where I think the focus of the portrait should be, I kind of just thought I'll just leave it like this. I think that I should be doing a bit more
Hmm.
there just to make it look like there is hair there because right now it just looks like a jumbled mess of
Yeah.
things. But I
Hmm.
guess it's up to whoever's doing the portrait to like what level you want to take it,
Hmm.
or what do you think about that?
I think, in the end, you just got to find a cool solution. You
Okay.
know, so much of drawing and painting is like, you start with this raw material. I used to say this talking about compositions, about commissions, that like you can't show up at the end of a commission and deliver your drawing and go, oh, well, well, what we just said. Oh, the hair kind of looked funny there. You know, what you have to say is you have to make the coolest version of it, or whatever it is. I mean, that's kind of the job. So, not that we have to succeed in that, but that's what we have to practice is how do I make cool versions of this stuff?
Hmm.
Um, so, I try to think about a theme, a theme that will express something that looks cool. So I'm looking for an S curve. I'm looking for a twist. I'm looking for, excuse me, sorry, looking for a yawn. I'm looking for a way to make that look dynamic and interesting. What I think about immediately is how it might be that the hair comes down the side and maybe like rolls over itself, so it like kind of creates a loop and then like kind of comes down like this. So I would by the way, this I firmly don't like, that the form shadow is somehow darker than the kind of ambient occlusion behind it. It's an unlikely circumstance, and I think to me, it's not as cool of a keying decision as it should be. I'd either wind up keeping those more the same, or having the neck, in fact, be a bit lighter than what's behind it.
Hmm. No, that makes a lot of sense.
Uh, so something like that, where you get a bit of that. What you really get is a way to differentiate, between her and kind of what's behind her. But uh, I'm gonna just let that go for now because I'd have to kind of redo some of the values in order to really communicate what was there. But in this instance, I just want to take the parts of this that I thought made a cool S curve and totally let go of the stuff that I thought didn't. And you can know that that's very much in your purview, in drawing, is to select the stuff that seems cool and totally omit the stuff that doesn't. As long as your drawing works and is good, then you win. I think that's about all there is to it. Yeah, there was that. I was talking with a Russian artist I know. They have this saying that's like once the like horse is out of the barn, like nobody cares. It's some weird like direct translation. The point is, it's kind of like if you won, it doesn't matter like how you won. It's that you did win. Like that's kind of the point, which is an interesting societal value to express. But the point is here, I think, if you make it look cool, I don't think people are gonna catch you up on why it's not, say, accurate, for example. Whereas maybe in the features, right, you could make it look cool, and somebody would catch you up on saying, well, but the likeness is not good, or it doesn't look like the model. That you need a bit more fidelity with.
Yeah. I guess it's somewhat the idea of picking your battles. Because,
Mm,
you can move around hair, but you can't move someone's nose very easily.
yeah. Not if it matters. Like a lot of our portraits, it's we assume that that likeness is important. And I think that's a fair enough story to tell, if we're trying to learn to do this stuff well. Fidelity is a great sort of what's the word? What what is it called when you have it's a light tower, not a lighthouse. It's a great lighthouse to sail toward. Well, that doesn't make sense because lighthouses you sail away from. It's a great North Star to guide
Okay.
your choice of direction, right?
Yeah.
So we kind of lean on it and rely on it. Although increasingly, I don't know how much we should treat it as like a core value of our practice. You know, yeah, I feel like in the end, a lot of what we're doing when we're drawing is kind of meditations on a design or expressions of our inner feelings, but giving them an outer form. And I don't know that how much accuracy necessarily interfaces with that idea, you know?
Hmm.
I've been writing a lot lately about style, just because it's kind of been, for whatever reason, it's been on my mind. Uh, but it's like, I think the reason that there's so much conversation around it, and I think so many artists who are learning obsess a bit about it, it's not just because of the whole, oh, galleries say you should have a style, so you gotta have a style. I think it's part of it. But I think that's a sort of like a post-important development. I think it was important before that. And its importance has dictated that galleries pick up on that. But I think for artists, it's more that the drawing that you produce is kind of like a projection of self. And if you don't recognize yourself in it, if you don't recognize your values or what you might not understand as your values, but what we like to see is liked for a reason, and that reason is your values. If you don't see that reflected in your drawing, it rings as a very hollow experience. You know, you don't feel like there's a feeling of dissonance, right, between what you think you should find as an expression of yourself and what it feels like that is not that. How did we get here?
Um,
We're talking about
Likeness.
hair.
Yeah. I think you started with, is likeness really super important?
Ah, likeness. Yes. Yeah. So, I mean, in the end, like as practicing portraiture, certainly, yeah, likeness can be a thing. Is it the predominant, preeminent thing? Well, I suppose it depends upon context. If it's a commission, obviously
Mm.
likeness is huge. If it's not a commission, I think other elements could potentially be as important. But even in a likeness commission based scenario, I say that a little bit more gesture in the hair will look better than a little bit less gesture in the hair.
Yeah, I think that's just something I'll have to work on. Then.
Yeah, tell me about it. I have a, oddly enough, I have a commission right now that is heavily hair involved.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah, it's massively. It's like probably 60% hair that I have to draw.
Wow.
It's kind of all gesture. But it's like it's embrace it or die. You know, like if you, you know, if you try to swim against the tide there, I think it's going to be a much more uncomfortable prospect. But then this drawing is, yeah, the darks seem to have gone darker. I wonder if it's a matter of like the halftone itself, the structure underneath it. I noticed that the other drawing maybe had more of uh, a kind of a detailed substructure to it, whereas this one maybe did not have as much of that.
Um, I think it did,
Okay.
but what makes you say that? Is it the halftone, the presence of halftones, or?
Yeah, I guess in some ways, like it seems more flat. Like the
Oh,
expression of
okay.
halftone does not derive as much form as the as it did in the other one. I mean, some of that I suppose could be incidental. It could be the pose itself, maybe that we're seeing less structurally significant features than we are in the other one, or simply that the structural features that are available are less clearly understood for you.
Hmm.
In any event, though, like it has a little bit of a kind of flatter feeling to it. And I mean, there's a couple like of just maybe raw kind of accuracy things. I think probably we're like seeing too much of this eye socket on the left hand side,
Yeah.
which leads the angle of the nose overall to kind of tilt back a little bit too far. You could probably see that angle altering, that eye socket getting a little bit more shallow, you know. So I think there's a couple of things like that that make me think, oh, that could be different, and we'd have like overall a slightly different feeling. Or alternatively, you could take it the other direction and say, if you brought the nose in and then brought the contour on the left in as well, that you get like a similar outcome, that eye socket also would become more shallow, and the cheek would not diverge maybe so far out from the kind of vertical line and axis of the chin and nose,
Hmm.
Like those things should be relatively tightly aligned.
Yeah, I did not catch that.
Well, it happens to all of us. I wouldn't worry about it. Yeah. I like the hair design on the right hand side. I feel like there's some cool shapes. Certainly, like the application of mass and value here are pretty good. It would be cool to see. It's a tough one. I think it's a tough one to recognize. And I will go back and forth on myself and say, 'cause I do get all the time, do you draw it because you see it that way or because you know it's that way? It's a muddy line to draw in that. But I do think in general that the eye sockets should carry a slightly darker value than, say, the lightest planes of the forehead, for example. And here they don't necessarily have that, and I think it detracts a little bit from the from the feeling of kind of form inside the head. But I also recognize where it's coming from. Like I see that there's light shapes there. But I guess for me, whenever I look at this area, I'm also looking at the cheek here. And when you do that in this situation, it's so clear the kind of divergence in between them.
Yeah. Maybe. Yeah, I wasn't thinking about downward facing planes or generally downward facing planes. And I think it just makes sense now to me to make sure, like, just as a check, to make sure that they're not the same value, upward facing planes and downward facing planes.
Yeah. Yeah, there's like a series of things when you're drawing where it's like, I view them as like two different things. Like there's things like, say, the halftone shapes that you find in the forehead versus the large planar structure of the forehead. The idiosyncratic shapes that you find require observation and investigation, and probably you should weight the results of your immediate observation over what you think is there. Whereas there are things like, the eye sockets generally are a downturning plane in relationship to the forehead. If the forehead's white, or sorry, if the forehead has lots of light on it, it's unlikely that the eye sockets will also,
Mm-hmm.
So there's this series of almost, I'm sure there's a word for this, but it's just like a flow chart of like, if this, then that,
Mm-hmm.
If the light's from above and the forehead is really light, eye sockets probably won't be. And there's like several things like that I go through that are what they are is perfunctory observations, like things that should be true and you can probably rely on being true if another thing is true. Top plane of the nose is very light, likely to be a shadow on the bottom plane. Probably going to be true in almost every case. But that's not really, I don't know if that's revealing anything new. Um, the other thing is that there's a correlation kind of between this side plane of the nose through here and more or less the side plane of the face through here. Uh, if you try to see a difference in between the left and right sides of that plane break, I think you see that the lightest parts of what is on the right of that are outliers to the character of that plane itself. That in general, it is more full of darker halftone than it is full of lighter halftone. And so it is useful and advisable to consider that as like a more unified plane, despite maybe some of the variation that you might find there.
Hmm. Yeah.
Which is observable, sure. It's also tricky to see as well. I guess all these things are kind of on one level or another are kind of hard to see because you need to kind of train your eyes how to see them. I'll say that I didn't for the longest time. You know, planes were probably one of the last like mysteries to unlock for me. Not because I think that they're hardest or that they require more than other things. I think it was just not as much a part of my the wheelhouse of my immediate instructors. So like they kind of it was like kind of like they would mention planes, but there was never an in-depth expression or explanation of exactly what those planes are supposed to do, like how it all worked, which hopefully, I provide some version of here. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I feel like that seems like a very basic idea that I have actually heard before, which is thinking about a low resolution or a reduction of the planes of whatever it is you're drawing.
Yeah.
Like, the head is a convex form.
Mm-hmm.
If like depending on where the light rests,
Mm-hmm.
I think that there's like the most basic form. The shadow should follow the most basic form. So the lightest areas should face the light. Well, saying it out loud sounds so silly because it's so obvious. But when you're just drawing, it's not always in your head.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it almost reminds me of like, I'm learning Norwegian super slowly because I'm really crap at languages. But it's kind of like that when you halfway speak a language, It's like you're stuttering to get the thing out and like you kind of can grasp around for what it is, but you're not like really fluent in it, And I feel like there's a version of that when you're drawing where it's like, yeah, I kind of have a sense of like it's round, but there are times when you just miss it, like it's like a thing that you don't quite grab a hold of, You'll revert to some other sort of translation type. Like for me, it was a big, between shadow shape, light shape versus planes and form. Those things didn't assimilate at the same time. So I would revert to maybe a version of that language that I understood a little bit better in places, and then in other places I would be able to interpret and analyze the form better. But yeah, just generally speaking, it's not. They don't necessarily arrive because you've heard them. Much like my Norwegian, I've heard tons of it. It doesn't necessarily arrive because I've heard it. I haven't like internalized the interaction of all the language in that field. Which again brings us back to drawing. It's a very complex system. I was talking to a friend of mine. He said that your life is the most complex system that you're likely to encounter. um, meaning that there's just variables constant. Drawing is like a bit like that. It's filled with to the brim with variables. Until such a time as you've collected enough data, you will have an inconclusive picture to be drawn from the data that you have collected, you know? I'm getting pretty far out there, Julian. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
It's getting too metaphorical. I've been writing, you know what it is? I've been writing too much lately. And you know, I just get way out there in these sort of flights of fancy.
Are you writing another book, or is it?
I am batting around like a cat with a ball of yarn, the idea of writing another book.
Okay.
I just, it dawned on me that when people ask me what my favorite part of my book is, it's always the first part, the vision part, where
Mm.
you get to talk about kind of the broad strokes of life as an artist and why you do it and what you believe in and your core values and how those inform what you make. And like all that stuff, I just is endlessly fascinating to me, much more so than the technical means of making it. I like making stuff, but talking about making stuff has its limits for me.
Mm.
Talking about the philosophy of belief and like why we make things, I have not yet found the bottom of that well in terms of my interest. So I don't necessarily wanted to write like I didn't want to write another instructional book because, as I said, I have my limits in terms of interest in that. Um, but the idea of writing a book of like essays, I was thinking of calling it like sketches and essays, you know, because like an essay is almost like a sketch in a lot of ways.
Hmm.
So doing a book or like it's basically a drawing book with a sort of a compendium of reflections about, you know, style and belief and values and things like this that maybe about 5 people on planet Earth will find interesting. That's kind of what I'm thinking of doing, you know?
Yeah. I mean, if you enjoy thinking about and writing about it, then why not?
Yeah, yeah. That's stimulating to me. So I know there will be at least 5 other people that will find it stimulating. No.
I think I would too, if I'm not part of those 5 people. Yeah.
Six then, Julie.
6.
Yeah. Yeah, but you know, you can see by the way, a couple tiny tweaks to that. Like the you know, my initial thought with this was that oh the likeness in particular is suffering here. It's amazing how small the things that you have to fix are
Hmm.
for likeness to get quite a bit closer, you know?
Yeah. It's just, it's boggling to think about, but the brain absorbs so much information, but
Mm.
consciously processes so little.
Oh, that's fun. I love that. Yeah. Absorbs so much, but consciously processes so little. Interesting that there's the caveat of consciously in there as well.
Well, maybe, I don't know if I just thought about it, but
No, I think it's sound. I mean,
yeah, like you don't
it
think,
goes somewhere.
yeah,
Like,
when,
we wouldn't have the means to absorb it if it did not have some end, or at least some proportion of it had an end.
yeah, and then,
But the conscious processing versus unconscious is interesting.
and it's about, you always hear people say, you had to train your artist eye so you can
Yeah,
see. I
yeah,
think that, you know, my eye isn't as developed as yours, so I didn't really
yeah,
think about that. So you kind of have to fall back to measuring
yeah,
sometimes.
yeah, yeah. That's a fascinating one too.
Then you
Also because
force
it's kind of a
the process.
statement that we all like walk straight over. You gotta train your eye.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, to my knowledge, eye is not really a thing that is trained. It's just a
Yeah.
sensory organ. Um, you know, so I mean, of course, we mean like learn to see stuff, but I I feel like there's kind of more meat on that bone, so to speak. Like what initially occurs to me is that um, a big part of what we do when we're drawing is obviously to translate something. And you could consider that the visual language is something we're translating it into, but I think there's another layer, and that is the material that we're using. Like there's certain things that graphite can, will, and won't do that need to be a part of that translation. You know, if you're chasing after information that's simply not applicable to graphite, you know what I mean? Like, I think there's an element to where you're training that part of the translation as well, is like, what does hair look like in graphite? What is the solution of eyelash shadows in graphite that works best? Because there's definitely versions of it that work worse than others.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that element too, where there is a friction in that translation between what you see and what material you're using to make it. Oil paint, don't get me started. I mean, oil paint is a mess. And to translate visual phenomenon into that is a highly specialized language. And if we want to bring it back to say a highly specialized training of the eye, to recognize a feature and understand what its correlation in oil paint would look like. Julian, this is fun. I hope you enjoyed as much as I do.
I do.
Yeah.
And it was great seeing you again.
Yeah, same.
Same time next month, I suppose.